Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in our series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart and the special pre-release promos. And if there's interest, maybe I'll do the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. So if you have a request for a specific commander you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. As you can see, today our commander is Kroxa and Kunoros, the Titan of Death's Hunger, and the three-headed guardian of Theros' underworld. According to the lore, Athreos has paroled Kroxa to devour the invading Phyrexians, and Kunoros is off his chain and bounding alongside to keep Kroxa in line. This is the kind of bonkers Greek myth that should be a just so story, like it ends with, and that's where earthquakes come from, or, and that's why dogs bury bones as an offering to the underworld, or, and that's why I built this as a commander deck. So before we get started, let's take a look at my deck building template. I wouldn't have chosen this card as my commander if I didn't think it was cool. So that's how I approach every commander deck. I want to showcase what the commander actually does. I put about 30 of my cards toward my game plan, which is that thing that the commander does and how it tries to win. 30 more cards go into support for that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration spells, and spot removal, interaction, that kind of thing. I'll do about 1 or 2 Wraths, just to keep things fresh if it needs to happen. Sometimes I'll do none, sometimes I'll do a few more if it feeds the game plan. And I have a floor of 38 lands because I want to cast my spells and I want to hit my land drops to do so. So let's talk about our team-up commander. Kroxa and Kunoros is a 6-mana, 6/6 Elder Giant Dog in Mardu colors. It has Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink, so we're here for combat. Attacking, blocking, whatever we want, our commander's going to do it. In addition, whenever Kroxa and Kunoros enters or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So in a way, it kind of gives a free escape for one of our creatures. We don't have to pay additional mana, we just have to exile 5 other cards. And it happens on enter the battlefield for Kroxa and Kunoros, or whenever our commander attacks. So I think it's pretty obvious what we want to do here. We're here to do some Reanimator shenanigans. Our early game is about ramping and filling up our graveyard with discard and self-mill effects. Once we can fish out our biggest hits, they break our opponent's backs with stats, value, or both. None of our threats are reasonably sized, and their effects are just as unreasonable. Some of them wheel us to refill our graveyard after Kroxa chews through it, while others help Kunoros pull more friends out of the ground. Best of all, we don't care if our creatures die, because we'll just bring them back again and again, repeatedly hammering our opponent's boards and faces with big splashy creatures, sticking to our strategy like a dog with a bone. If you don't mind being the villain at the table, and you think Commander is best when it's a game of King of the Mountain, you'll enjoy this deck. So let's get into our game plan. We're going to start by talking about the creatures we're bringing back. I mean, that's the whole point of our deck. We've got 27 cards that I've called big hits. These are all things that are either mana value 5 or greater, or, for the first one we're talking about, have good stats and good abilities that will support it. These aren't the only creatures in the deck, but these are our big ones and the ones we want to reanimate and we want to support ourselves with having out. I should mention, as usual, on this Moxfield page, the deck list of which is linked in the description below, there is a considering section below the deck itself that has a bunch of other cards in it that I considered while building the deck. If you have a bigger budget, or maybe a smaller budget, and you want to adapt the deck, or if you want to go in one of the couple of directions I've gone a little harder, a little more focused in that particular way rather than this way, check out that considering section and you'll see what we've put in it. So let's talk about our hits. We're going to start with the Warring Triad. This is a card from the Final Fantasy Commander product. For 3 generic mana, we get a legendary artifact creature, God. It is a 5/5 with flying, trample, and haste. That all seems great. Surely there's no drawback mechanic. And it says, as long as there are fewer than 8 cards in your graveyard, the Warring Triad isn't a creature. Okay, so there's a drawback mechanic. That's fine. It also says, tap and mill a card. Target player adds 1 mana of any color. So this is a mana rock early game and a 5/5 flying trample haste late game. We can use it to tap it, It comes in. If we don't have this sort of like super threshold, 8 cards in our graveyard, we just tap it to add mana, and we mill a card. We want to get cards in our graveyard, so that's great. And having milled something, we're one closer to being able to use the Warring Triad as a creature. But we can also, it says, add mana for another player if we wanted to. We may not need the mana on one particular turn cycle. We just want the mill. So we can tap that anytime we feel like to get another card into our graveyard. And if we say to another player, how many times have you or another player you played with said, if only I had one more mana? You can make a deal with them and say, look, I can give you that mana if you need it. Just leave me alone for a turn cycle. Sometimes that's enough to lose them in the game because it gets you an awful lot, but in the moment, they might go for it. So yeah, Warring Triad is a cool card, especially in this deck. Next up, we have Angel of Suffering. Notice, the second card in this section is a 5-drop. Angel of Suffering is a mythic from Streets of New Capenna, one of my favorite sets. So cool. 3 in double black for a 5/3 flying Nightmare Angel that says, if damage would be dealt to you, prevent that damage, and mill twice that many cards. So this is, I know you may be thinking, wow, what a dangerous card. How likely are you to take 50 damage, or 45 damage that wouldn't kill you anyway, any other way? Don't worry about the mill. The mill is a good thing here. It's not something that's going to hurt you, especially because this prevents all the damage that would be dealt by creatures, by lightning bolts, by any other sort of method. The only thing that will get around this is if someone has an effect that says damage can't be prevented, like, Questing Beast. So, Angel of Suffering, it's a 5-power flyer. That's going to be great for you. And it's helping you put things in your graveyard, which may mean you don't want to block at all. You say, oh, you're attacking me for 20 damage? Yeah, no blocks. Let it come in, you don't take the damage, you mill 40 cards, and you can power something out with Kroxa and Kunoros, or fill have your library filled up so that you can use other reanimate effects, or just effects like the Warring Triads that makes this into a 5/5 flyer with trample. Next up is Archpriest of Shadows, also from March of the Machine. This is a really great card. For 3 in double black, you get a 4/4 human warlock with, let's just talk about Death Touch first. Death Touch on a 4/4 seems great. And also, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or battle, there's not much in the way of battles out, and we're not running any in our deck, but when this deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So just straight up reanimate something. That's alright for a 4/4 Death Touch, but it also has Backup 1. Backup 1 means when this enters, we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. It can be the Archpriest of Shadows, it could be our Angel of Suffering, whatever we want. And that creature, if it's not the Archpriest of Shadows, gets every other ability below the backup ability that Archpriest of Shadows has until end of turn. So if we have the Angel of Suffering out, we play our Archpriest, it comes in, the backup ability triggers, we put a counter on Angel of Suffering, so it's now a 6/4, and Angel of Suffering until end of turn has Death Touch, and whenever it does combat damage to a player, reanimate something. So Archpriest of Shadows is here. Worst case scenario, it's a 4/4 Death Touch. That's okay. That's a pretty great blocker. Maybe that can even get in for combat damage. But we have it here for its backup ability. We may be able to use it, like I said, for combat damage and use it to reanimate something if we've got a clear field, or if our opponent just forgets that it has that ability. But really, that backup 1, we put that on something that we have that's already out, whether or not it's evasive. People don't want to deal with a Death Toucher. But then they have to make the choice. Do I want to lose one of my creatures, or maybe even hope to trade in order to prevent us from getting something back from our graveyard, which, if Angel of Suffering is out, hopefully, we've got a lot of things in there. So Archpriest of Shadows is pretty fun. There are some more powerful effects than this, but this is $1.50. There's several different cards in this deck that I didn't include because they're $12, $16. So yeah, again, check the considering section below if you want to swap some things around. Next up is Doom Whisperer. This is a 6/6 Nightmare Demon for 3 in double black that has flying and trample, and at instant speed, we can just pay 2 life and surveil 2. And we could keep doing that if we want. If we want to pay 10 life, we can surveil 2 5 times. And if we want to surveil all those cards of the graveyard, it's sort of like paying 10 to mill 10. That might be great. That's enough to bring something back with Kroxa and Kunoros. In all likelihood, doing that 3 times to put 6 cards in the graveyard, we're probably going to find one of our big hits in there, if we didn't already have one. And it's going to give us the 5 cards we need to free it. So that is us paying life for some things, but that's okay. We've got plenty of life to pay, and what are we using it for anyway? So, also, I mean, it's a 6/6 flyer with trample. That's not nothing, and it's pretty spooky art. Spooky. All right, next up is Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide is a classic. For 3 and double white, we get a 2/2 Angel Spirit with flying and protection from black. Protection from black may be notable in our deck because we are running black as well. So, for example, we couldn't target Karmic Guide with the backup ability of Archpriest of Shadows because Archpriest of Shadows is itself black. But this is also protected from anything black of our opponents, so that's pretty nice. Regardless, it has Echo for the same cost as its mana cost, which is to say, at the start of our upkeep, if this came in last turn, we have to pay the Echo cost again. We pay the Echo cost or we sacrifice it. So Karmic Guide, if we wanted to cast it and keep it around, we're going to end up paying 10 mana total for it if we want the Echo. Let's return to that. Because next is, when it enters, we reanimate something. We just bring a creature back from our graveyard to the battlefield. That's pretty alright. For 3 and double white, we get a flyer that we get to keep around for at least this turn, and then it brings something else back with it. Then we get to our next turn. During the upkeep, the Echo ability goes on the stack, and we choose not to pay it. We put our Karmic Guide back in our graveyard. And then we use something else, maybe our commander, maybe one of our other effects that reanimate something, to reanimate the Karmic Guide. Protection only works on the battlefield. So if we had Archpriest of Shadows is not targeting, Archpriest of Shadows does target. It'll target the Karmic Guide in the graveyard, but protection does not work while this is in the graveyard. It only works while this is a creature, not just a creature card. So we could use, for example, Archpriest of Shadows or our commander to bring the Karmic Guide back. When it does, it will enter, it will return a creature card, and it'll stay on the battlefield until the Echo trigger at the start of the next upkeep. So even if all we use this for is to have a single turn cycle of this 2/2 flyer with protection from black that happened to bring something else back to us, and then we let it go, that's all right. We don't need the Karmic Guide to stick around, we can always bring it back. Next up is Sir Conrad the Grim, a much derided card that is great in our deck. For all the milling we're doing, all of the reanimating, yeah. Sir Conrad is 3 and double black for a 5/4 human knight with 2 abilities. The first is, whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. That is to say, if a creature card goes to your graveyard from anywhere, or if it leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's what that all means. So anytime creatures go to your graveyard or leave your graveyard, all of your opponents are losing a life. And then Sir Conrad, for 1 and a black, can have each player mill a card. So milling cards helps us get our creatures into our graveyard so that we can reanimate them. When Sir Conrad sees creatures go to our graveyard, everyone else loses a life, or takes a damage, I should say. When we attack with our creatures, or block with our creatures, or in any of those things, stuff's going to die, and Sir Conrad's going to do damage to everyone. But I want to make mention, I just said that the way this looks is anytime a creature goes to your graveyard from anywhere, or a creature leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad does the damage. But there's actually one other aspect of that. It's when creatures go to your graveyard, or or your opponent's creatures die. It's when any creature dies. That's why it's separated out this way. Any creature on the battlefield dies, Sir Conrad triggers. Any creature's cards of yours go to your graveyard. No, I'm lying to you. I'm sorry. I'll make this clearer. Whenever any creature goes to a graveyard, Any creature from anywhere, whether it's the battlefield or not, goes to any graveyard, Sir Conrad does a damage to everyone. And when creatures leave our graveyard, 1 more damage. So Sir Conrad is a card that makes you have to say, okay, how many creatures of yours died? All right, everyone takes that much damage. And then how about you? How many creatures of yours died? Yep, everyone takes that much damage too. It's all triggers, it's a separate trigger for each one if that's relevant. But if there's a board wipe and 20 creatures die, each of your opponents is taking 20 damage. Yeah. Combustible Gear Hulk is next. For 4 and double red, we have a 6/6 artifact construct with first strike. It says, when it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you mill 3 cards, and then Combustible Gear Hulk deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. So you have 2 things going. You either get a free Ancestral Recall and put 3 cards in your hand, or you get to mill 3, which is what you want to do anyway, and you add up the total mana value of those cards, and the player who chose to let you mill takes that much damage. And you've got a 6/6 first striker sitting around. So hopefully, we're getting some mill out of this. But if we get some card draw, it's wild to say that drawing cards is the second best thing to happen, because drawing cards is so great. So yeah, you have here a Combustible Gear Hulk that will be a good attacker, a great blocker, and hopefully mill you some cards or draw some things. Also notable that it is one of our few artifacts that'll come up, that'll be relevant later in our removal section. Next up, we have Dreadhound. For 4 and double black, we have a 6/6 Demon Dog. When Dreadhound enters the battlefield, we mill 3 cards, so just free value right there. And whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a little bit like Sir Conrad. Sir Conrad does damage, Dreadhound does life loss. They end up being about the same thing, but it could be relevant depending on other cards that are triggered based on damage or loss of life. If it's a loss of life effect, Sir Conrad can trigger it, and so does Dreadhound, but if it's a damage effect, Dreadhound does not trigger from it. However, Dreadhound cares about when creatures die or when creatures are milled, basically. Sir Conrad can care about if creatures are discarded, or if creatures are, if they return to a graveyard from exile for some reason, then he would trigger as well, the Dreadhound wouldn't. But Dreadhound is a nice backup for Sir Conrad, and having 2, not terrible, especially when Dreadhound gives us a free mill just as it comes in, and has a little bit better stats. Redundancy. Next up, we have Etali Primal Storm, a classic friend that I'm glad they brought back in Foundations. For 4 and double red, we have a legendary Elder Dinosaur. When Etali attacks, we exile the top card of each player's library, and then we may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So we get Etali out, we attack with Etali, we will exile the top card of our library, as will all of our opponents, and we might get 4 spells to cast. Worst case scenario, we get 4 lands off the top of everyone's library. That's okay, we're still attacking with a 6/6 Elder Dinosaur. Yeah, enough to be said about Etali. Etali is one of the couple of ways that we have to cast our opponent's spells or get our opponent's creatures. I don't typically use those kinds of effects, but Etali is just a classic and a lot of fun. Flayer of the Hatebound is next. For 5 and a red, we have a 4/2 Devil with Undying, which means when it dies, if it didn't have any counters on it, or 1/1 counters at least, it comes back with a 1/1 counter. And whenever it or another creature enters from our graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So Flayer of the Hatebound, if we cast it from our hand, it's a 4/2. Okay, it's a 4/2. And then, if it dies, its Undying ability will trigger, it will return as a 5/3, and it will deal 5 damage to any target. So this is a great way for us to do surprise damage either to our opponents or to remove their creatures. But also, while this is in play, if we have something get reanimated, like let's say the Karmic Guide comes into play and it reanimates, I don't know, Etali, Flayer of the Hatebound will see Etali enter from the graveyard and will have Etali do 6 damage to any target. So this is a great synergy piece in this deck, especially when we're bringing so many things back so regularly. Next up, this card is crazy. From the Duskmourn Commander decks, we have Metamorphosis Fanatic. For 4 and double black, we get a 4/4 human cleric with lifelink that says, when it enters, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. Reanimate a creature, put a lifelink counter on it. That's awesome. And that would be awesome on its own, even if it didn't have Miracle for 1 and a black. Miracle is a cool effect. It says, you may cast this card for its Miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you drew this turn. So the idea is, during your draw step, assuming that's the first time you draw, when you draw this card, you flip it over immediately to show that, hey, this is the first card I drew. And you could point to its Miracle cost, you could pay 1 and a black, and you cast it right then, during your draw step. And then, of course, it'll trigger, still during your draw step, you get a creature to come in, and then you move to your main phase 1. So Metamorphosis Fanatic is like, the idea of getting a 4/4 lifelinker for 2 is pretty great on its own. Getting a 4/4 lifelinker for 2 and also bringing back your scariest thing from your graveyard and giving it permanent lifelink for no additional mana, yeah, this card is really fun. For the same mana value, however, you could get a Noxious Gearhulk. For 4 and double black, or I guess the same mana cost, I should say. 4 and double black, you get a 5/4 artifact construct with Menace. And when it enters, you may destroy another creature, and if you do, gain life equal to its toughness. That's pretty alright. If you try to hit something that's indestructible, or try to hit something and it's given indestructible, or it is exiled or something, you won't gain the life, obviously, but if it's destroyed, alright. So this is an expensive murder, but you get a little life off of it, and you end up with a 5/4 Menace. And again, true for all of these creatures, if this dies, whatever, you'll get it back later. Or if you don't need it back later, it's something you can exile with our commander's ability to get something else back. Next up is Rakdos, Patron of Chaos. This is the Murders at Karlov Manor Rakdos. For 4 black and a red, you get a 6/6 Flying Trampling Demon. 6/6 Flample is pretty great on its own, but in addition, at the beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice 2 non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, you draw 2 cards. So this is our opponent being forced to sacrifice 2 things that they paid for somehow. These are not just tokens, these are not their lands. And if they don't, we draw a free 2 cards from our 6/6 Flampler. Thanks, Rakdos. You are a terrible demon, but a great addition to the deck. Next up we have Ruin Grinder. I love this card. Ruin Grinder is 5 and a red for a 7/4 artifact construct with Menace. So 7/4 Menace, come on. And when it dies, each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. So this is a great way for us to get a hand of big stuff into our graveyard, and if the stuff in our hand isn't big, it doesn't matter because we can always exile it later to empower to pay for, I should say, the ability from our commander to bring back something that is big. And we draw 7. Yeah, everyone else is doing this too, but by the time our 6 mana 7/4 Menace has died, players have probably gotten a hand that has at least a few things that they're holding up, that they're looking forward to casting. Now those things are in their graveyard, and if they can't take advantage of it the way we can, that's value for us. But also, Ruin Grinder has Mountain Cycling for 2. So we can pay 2 mana and discard this from our hand to search our library for a mountain, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. Which means not only is this a way for us to draw a 6 mana spell and turn it into a land if we happen to need one, it's also a way for us to just get Ruin Grinder into the graveyard. So if we need it to come back later, we can get it to come back later using our commander's ability. Plus, it's notable that this is mountain cycling, not basic mountain cycling or basic land cycling. So if you have a typed duel that has the mountain type, you can get that dual land into your hand with this mountain cycling ability. After that, we have Sister Hospitaller from the Warhammer 40k commander decks. For 4, a white and a black, we have a 3/2 human cleric with just 1 ability. When it enters, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, gain life equal to its mana value. So 6 mana for a 3/2 is a little expensive, but it comes back with whatever we need and we gain life based on its mana value. If it could hit itself, we'd be gaining 6 off of it. It's not based on the power of the creature. So pretty nice. This card is expensive because there is currently a combo with it. I think in Modern, don't quote me on that, I don't play Modern, but yeah, Sister Hospitaller is a sweet card for this deck, one of our more expensive cards, but a lot of fun. Next up is Sun Titan, 4 and double white for a 6/6 giant with Vigilance that says when it enters or attacks, same as our commander, you may return target permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now I know you're thinking, didn't we just go through a bunch of cards that are all mana value 5 or greater other than the Warring Triad? Yes, we did. But this can bring back the Warring Triad. Or this could bring back basically any other card in our deck that isn't one of these big creatures or one of our big enchantments. Being able to get back maybe one of our lands that we put in our graveyard, that's pretty good. Getting back a mana rock that we might be able to use, like our Soul Ring, that's all right. We have a few lands that are fetch lands, so we get that back with Sun Titan, fetch with it immediately, and we have the same number of cards in our graveyard, but now more permanents in play thanks to the Sun Titan. And we can keep doing that every turn whenever Sun Titan attacks. So repeatable reanimate, even though it's limited to mana value 3 or less, is great. Thanks, Sun Titan. We're glad you're here. Next is Angel of the Ruins. For 5 and double white, we have a 5/7 artifact angel with flying that says when it enters, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So it's double disenchant, but exiled when it enters. Or, of course, entering happens when it gets reanimated. But like the Rune Grinder, it has plane cycling for 2. So same benefits here. It gets this card into the graveyard for us to reanimate, lets us find a planes. If we happen to be running a typed dual land, we'll be able to use the plane cycling to grab that. Now, we aren't running any typed duals in this deck because I wanted to keep our costs down. But if you want to put in something like, a Blood Crypt that you could find with your Mountain Cycler, or a Godless Shrine you could find with your Plane Cycler, I mentioned those two because black is our bigger color. That would be a great use for this. Next up is Karavek the Merciless. For 5, a black and a red, we get a 5/4 legendary human shaman that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, Karavek deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. So this is very similar to Flayer of the Hatebound, but it triggers an awful lot more. Any spell our opponents cast, we're getting to do that much damage to any target. Are we having opponent A cast a spell that costs 4 mana and doing 4 damage to opponent B, maybe killing them or making it so that they are more tempting to attack by opponent C? Or maybe are we killing off opponent C's creature or planeswalker? Maybe we're hitting their battle to help out opponent B. This is a great effect for removal, of course, but also for politics. If our opponent's saying, hey, I want to cast some spells, I will leave you alone if you don't hit me with the Karavek triggers. That sounds pretty great. It's worth wheeling and dealing for. Or you could say, well, hey, next time you cast some spells, I could be persuaded to go after our opponent. Or you could say, if you cast some spells, what will you give me to send those at this creature? Or maybe I think it would be a good idea for you to cast some spells so I can take the damage that Karavek gives me from them to clear the way for you to attack this other guy. All I ask is that you agree to attack that other guy and not me. Lots of fun you can have with Karavek. Plus, this is a really annoying effect on a 7 mana card, so it seems like something that we would hate to have lost. So it's a little bit of removal bait. That removal is therefore not getting used on our other things that we might care about more. Especially because, like I've mentioned a couple of times, if Karavek or any of our other creatures die, who cares? We'll just bring them right back. Getting Karavek out of the way for a turn cycle might be worth it to an opponent. Which means they're not getting our Sun Titan out of the way, or our Rakdos, or our commander. Yeah. Next up is Sepulchral Primordial. For 5 and double black, we get a 5/4 avatar with Intimidate. Intimidate is like Proto-Menace. It says this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. So Sepulchral Primordial can only be blocked by artifact creatures or black creatures. And when it enters, For each opponent, you may put up to one target creature card from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this is another way that we can steal our opponent's creatures. That just seems like fun, you know? Having big stuff come in when no one expects it to, that's our whole deck. So grabbing the things that our opponents lost before to maybe some of our effects, that sounds great. Or just having things come in and maybe they're utility creatures, like we get a Burnished Heart that comes in. We'll be able to sacrifice that right away and do a little bit of ramping of our own. This is just a great utility creature, and 5/4 Intimidate. That's pretty good. Even better, though, is 4 and triple white for Sarah's Emissary, a 7/7 angel with flying that says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a card type. We usually will choose creature, but it depends on what's in your pod. And it says, you and creatures you control have protection from the chosen card type, which means if we choose creature, all of our creatures can't take damage from any other creatures on the battlefield, but also all of our creatures are unblockable. Because protection prevents damage, having things attached to it, being blocked by it, and being targeted by it. So sometimes it might be worth, choosing instant. It could be worth even choosing artifact, depending on who we're playing against, or enchantment, if we've got an enchantress player at the table. But creature is usually the way to go, because we have a lot of big creatures, and being able to swing without being able to be blocked, that's pretty alright. Again, Sarah's Emissary is removal bait, but even one turn of having all of our creatures have protection from creatures, or from something, and plus us, yeah, that's a good addition. Next is the Balrog of Moria from the Lord of the Rings Commander product. For 4, 2 black, and a red, we get an 8/8 legendary Avatar Demon with trample and haste. An 8/8 trample haste. And it says, when it dies, you may exile it. And if you do, for each opponent, exile up to one target creature that player controls. So this is, I wouldn't call it a non-bow, but it does only have an effect here that when it dies, we have to lose it. It goes out of our graveyard forever, it's exiled. I mean, that will trigger Sir Conrad twice, because it died, which means it went to the graveyard, and then this trigger goes on the stack. We could exile it, it'll leave the graveyard, Sir Conrad gets triggered again. I mean, that's nice. And it lets us exile, the worst things on each of our each of our opponents' playmats. But it makes me sad to think that we might lose the Balrog. I would like to bring the Balrog back. Which is why it's great that the Balrog has cycling. For 3 and a red, we can discard this card from our hand and draw a card, and when we cycle the Balrog, we make 2 treasure tokens. So early on, we can turn the Balrog into card draw and ramp that we are going to want to have anyway, and now it's in our graveyard for us to reanimate it, and we have a surprise trample haste that's an 8/8. And if someone wants to kill it, they're welcome to. We're probably going to kill the biggest, scariest thing on their board that's still left after maybe they blocked this 8/8 trampler. So the Balrog makes a lot of an impact. It may not make a perpetual impact for 7 mana, but I mean, neither is Sarah's Emissary if it's getting removed, so pretty good card. Next up is Archon of Cruelty. For 6 and double black, so 8 mana, we get a 6/6 flyer. And when it enters or attacks, same as our commander, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discards a card, and loses 3 life. All 3 happen. And we draw a card and gain 3 life. So a 6 mana life swing, we draw, they discard, and they have to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. It doesn't say non-token, but how much more do you want? Plus, also they're being attacked with a 6/6 flyer. Archon of Cruelty has a little bit of a reputation from play in other formats, but is not super expensive anymore. Seems good. Next we have Ashen Rider, another 8 mana card. 4, 2 white, and 2 black for a 5/5 flyer. When it enters or dies, exile target permanent. So we want to hit with this every chance we get. Comes in, exile the scariest thing on the battlefield. Maybe it was even like a Gaia's Cradle or a Tolarian Academy, if you're playing in that kind of pod. If you are, you may not be playing an Ashen Rider, but who knows? You might be playing at a Magic Con or at your LGS in a random pod. In any case, Ashen Rider is 8 mana, but why would you pay 8 mana when you can just escape it with your commander? And when it comes in, we exile something. When we attack with it, we exile something. Or I'm sorry, when we attack with it and it dies, we exile something. Then we bring it right back and exile something else. Ashen Rider is just so annoying to play against. So maybe your removal of your opponent's removal is being used against it rather than your commander or something else you might care about more. And when that happens, you just bring it back again. Avatar of Slaughter fits in this deck so well. For 6 and double red, we get an 8/8 avatar that says all creatures have double strike and attack each combat if able. It does not say all creatures you control. So if we have at least a little bit of a board, we play Avatar of Slaughter, or we reanimate it. It comes out, all of our creatures now have double strike and attack each combat if able. We know that's going to happen on every other player's turn as well. So we need to be prepared for them to attack us with their double strikers that have to attack. So it could be that we might want to reanimate Avatar of Slaughter during our second main phase. So all of our creatures, while they do have double strike, they are still untapped. We do have cards with vigilance, like our commander. It's a 6/6 vigilance. So it can attack with double strike and still block, but something worth considering with Avatar of Slaughter. This is a card where you say, I want the game to be over, it's time to be. Yeah, lots of fun, especially when your opponents know you're a reanimator deck and you have an Avatar of Slaughter in your graveyard. You say, all right, everyone, is it time? I think it is. And maybe you can even get some political grist out of that. If someone says, look, I know you're gonna reanimate that at some point, I will leave you alone for the next turn cycle if you just let me position myself a little better by not doing that yet. Which is great. You're getting a benefit out of not taking a game action. You can do something else. Yeah. Avatar of Slaughter is really fun in this. Next we have Scion of Darkness. Great Mark Zug art. Love this thing. For 5 and triple black, we get a 6/6 trampling avatar that says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get to reanimate something, but from their graveyard. We put a creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. So another card that lets us steal great creatures from our opponent's graveyard, but also we can cycle this just for 3 generic. Cycle it, discard it, draw a card. It's in our graveyard. If we don't feel like stealing our opponent's stuff, we can always exile this with Kroxa and Kunoros' abilities. By using it as one of the cards that we exile to escape something else. Maybe what we're escaping is Zatalpa Primal Dawn. I know you were looking at that Atali and wondering where Atali's friends are. Well, here's one of them. Zatalpa is 6 generic and 2 white for a 4/8 Elder Dinosaur with flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Just keyword soup. The sky takes flight and the earth trembles. This card is... It's so funny to me how many times this card's been included in, reprints, like it's in Foundations or in Commander products like the Precons. It's just so powerful and so appealing in the sort of Timmy-Tammy space. You just want to have a big thing that does big things and you can't get rid of it. Look at this thing. It's big. That's enough. Sometimes you just have to ask yourself, are you flapping? Rhea Dawnbringer is 9 mana for a 4/6 angel for a 6 and triple white that has flying, and it says that at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Rhea is a 4/6 flyer for a lot of mana that brings something back every upkeep. There's no reason to stop attacking with our Archon of Cruelty, with our Ashen Rider, with our Avatar of Slaughter. I mean, we can't with him. With it? Yes. If Rhea's here, we let the Ashen Rider die. We let the Archon of Cruelty die. We let whatever we have die, and Rhea will bring it back every turn. Maybe we play Rhea or reanimate Rhea during our second main phase. No one expects it before combat, so they block us thinking that we're done. But in our deck, they should know we're not done. We're here to reanimate, and we're going to keep doing that. So that covers our big hits. Let's talk about the ways that we get things into the graveyard. We've got 25 different ways to do it. We're starting with Faithless Looting. Let me know in the comments if you love or hate this art. I think it bangs. I think this is great. But I know it's a little bit polarizing, so let me know in the comments what you think. In any case, Faithless Looting is a classic sorcery for a single red, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, and then you can flash it back for 2 and a red. Flashback meaning you can cast it for 2 and a red from your graveyard, and when you do, you exile it. Faithless Looting is great in this deck. It's such a cheap way for us to have card selection, but also selection for our graveyard. We take it and we know we want to be able to cast our spells, we're hurting for land, let's just draw 2 more and put our big creatures in the graveyard so we can reanimate them later. Or maybe we have stuff we want to cast in our hand, and we have too many lands in play already, or enough lands in play, I should say. Well, we draw some lands, we'll just put those in the graveyard. Faithless Looting gives us so much for a single red, it can't be overstated how great this card is. Same thing is true for Stitcher Supplier. A single black for a 1/1 zombie that comes in, and when it enters or dies, we mill 3. So being able to just have 1 black mana, mill 3, it's not quite as good as, I think, 1 red mana, draw 2, discard 2, but we get to do it twice, when this enters or when it dies. It may be the case that we want to bring this back at some point, maybe with our commander even, or maybe with our Sun Titan. This enters, we mill 3, it dies, we mill 3, Sun Titan enters, this comes back, we mill 3 more, we just keep filling up our graveyard and having more things to reanimate and more cards to exile with our commander to reanimate those things. Next we have Bitter Triumph. For 1 and a black, we have an instant that has an additional cost to either pay 3 life or discard a card, and it will destroy target creature or planeswalker. So it's Hero's Downfall for 1 less black mana, but it asks us to discard a card. Oh no, we have to take one of our beloved creatures and put it in our graveyard so that we can reanimate it later? I just can't imagine it. But if we have no cards in hand, let's say, or nothing we want to get rid of from our hand, we can pay 3 life. Our commander has lifelink. And if not, we can still pay that 3 life, even if it takes us to 1. This is a deck that is not meant to win, it's meant to win with big creatures. So Bitter Triumph is a great removal spell that makes, not just gets things off the battlefield, but when we're attacking with our big creatures and an opponent makes a profitable multi-block, Bitter Triumph says that multi-block is no longer quite as profitable. Pretty fun. Collector's Vault is so good in this deck from Wilds of Eldraine. For 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that says pay 2 and tap it to draw a card and discard a card and then create a treasure. So it gives us a way to fill our graveyard, it gives us more cards in our hand than just this card selection effect, plus it ramps us, and sometimes we're going to want to cast our big creatures. I mean, our commander is a 6 mana creature, so being able to have this out, even on turn 2, by the time we're able to cast our commander, that might be turn 4 because of these treasures, and we've put a couple of cards in our graveyard, ready for our commander to come out. Now, when our commander comes out on turn 4, it's not that likely that we have enough cards that we can escape something with it. But who knows? Maybe Stitcher Supplier and Faithless Looting have helped us. Collector's Vault is really great. Next, we have Demand Answers. For 1 and a red, we have an instant that says, as an additional cost, sacrifice an artifact or discard a card to draw 2 cards. So this is a little bit of an upgrade to Thrill of Possibility, which is the same kind of instant speed Tormenting Voice, but this lets us sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. So if it turns out we don't have a card we want to discard, or we don't have a card at all to discard, we can always throw away our Rune Grinder or our Angel of the Ruins. Sacrifice one of those things, and we'll just get it back next turn, or whenever, maybe it will be this turn, whenever we can reanimate it. So those artifact creatures are great for this, to just get more cards into our hand. Next up we have Milliken, which doesn't look like a creature, but it is. Milliken is 2 generic mana for an artifact creature construct. It's a 0/1, but it says tap and mill a card to add a colorless mana. So Milliken is a creature, but it's here to be a mana source for us. Not to mention, it puts cards in our graveyard in the process. Similar to the way the Warring Triad works, but we can't add the mana in the color, and we can't add it to someone else. So yeah, Milliken is a nice include for that reason. Cemetery Tampering from Streets of New Capenna is also really fun. 2 and a black for an enchantment with Hideaway 5, which means when it enters, we look at the top 5 of our library, put 4 of them on the bottom in a random order, but exile one of them face down under Cemetery Tampering. And then, at the beginning of our upkeep, we mill 3. And then if there are 20 or more cards in our graveyard, we can cast, or play, I should say, the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So it says play, which means if we exile the land, we can play it. If we still have a land drop that turn, which we will because this is our upkeep. And if it's a spell, we can cast it for free. That's all right. In my testing of this deck, there's not a lot of times when we have 20 cards in our graveyard because we're going to use those cards. But even with that in mind, 2 and a black to just mill 3 at the start of every upkeep, that feeds us so much. And if it comes to be at some point that we do have a lot of cards in our graveyard, Cemetery Tampering gives us a benefit for that. And it's probably something that we can use to reanimate something else, or at the very least, to get us back to parity. Yeah, Cemetery Tampering seems like a lot of fun. Next we have Saw in Half. Now I know you're looking and you're saying that's from... Ooh, here we go. That's from Unfinity. Unfinity is a joke set. You are correct, and it was a fun set. Despite all of the problems that Unfinity brought to some other formats, it sure was fun in its limited environment. And it had some cards that are eternal legal. It's black border, it doesn't have an acorn stamp. This card is legal, in Commander. I think it was even reprinted in the Duskmourn Commander precons. But in any case, Saw in Half is, for 2 and a black, we destroy a creature, and we make 2 copies of it with half the power and half the toughness of the original creature. We just round up each time. So Saw in Half seems like it would be a removal spell. Saw in Half is a reanimate spell. Because if we have a Sun Titan, let's say, we can saw that Sun Titan in half, and we get 2 3/3 Sun Titan tokens, and the original Sun Titan goes to the graveyard. Both of those tokens get their interest trigger. So if we were to saw in half, let's say, the Stitcher Supplier, we would get 2 Stitcher Suppliers, because the tokens would come in with power equal to 1/2, but it says round up, so they would just be 1/1s. Saw in Half is anything we may need it to be based on whatever creatures we have in play, because we want to saw our own things in half. We can even hit our commander with this. If we have plenty of cards in our graveyard and we really want to do this, we'll kill Kroxa and Kunoros and have it go back to the command zone, or maybe to the graveyard, depending on what we want to do. Both of the Kroxa and Kunoros clones will come in. They will both be legendary, and of course they'll both be 3/3s, so we'll have to legend rule them away, but they both have the interest trigger. So let's say we can exile 5 cards from our graveyard and bring a remaining creature card back, and do that twice, assuming we have the creatures for it, or the cards in the graveyard for it. Saw in Half can give us so much more than we need, or that we may need, at the cost of some stats of our creatures. In addition, whatever creature that we destroyed is now in the graveyard, waiting for us to bring it back at full power. Next up, we have Seize the Spoils. Seize the Spoils is from Kaldheim. 2 and a red for a sorcery that requires us to discard a card as an additional cost, but it lets us draw 2 cards and make a treasure. This is that classic effect, but it's the only version, I think, in 3 mana. So that's why it's here. It lets us put a card in our graveyard, lets us draw 2, make a little treasure, do a little ramping in that way. Pretty great. Stinkweed Imp is next. This is our 1 dredge card in the deck. For 2 and a black, we get a 1/2 flying imp that says whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature. That is not Death Touch. This is a triggered ability. This goes on the stack. Death Touch happens just when state-based actions are checked. So even though it seems like Death Touch, it's not. However, we have it in here for its Dredge ability. Dredge is, if you would draw a card while this is in the graveyard, instead, mill 5, and you can return this from your graveyard to your hand. Put a different way, it's like when Stinkweed Imp is in the graveyard, every time you would draw a card, you can instead mill 5 and draw the Stinkweed Imp from your graveyard. It's not drawing, but you can think of it that way. It's saying that, would you rather draw the Stinkweed Imp? If you do, you have to mill 5 first. So this is a great way for us to have the Stinkweed Imp die, and in the process, probably kill another creature. And then we can do some milling of 5 to replay the Stinkweed Imp. So that kind of repeated process, that's going to be a lot of fun and fill up our graveyard with as many cards as we need to bring other creatures back with our commander's trigger. We've seen the Warring Triad. We know why it's here because it mills us cards. Victimize is so much fun. 2 and a black for a sorcery that says choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. So you have to have 2 creature cards in your graveyard. Then sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So, as opposed to how some people read this, you cannot sacrifice a creature and bring it and another creature back. You have to choose 2 target cards in your graveyard before this begins, and it has to be exactly 2. It's not up to 2. But if you've got a creature in play and 2 creatures you want back from your graveyard, which in this deck is often true, Victimize will let you trade the 1 on the battlefield for the 2 in your graveyard. Next is Big Score. Big Score is great. This is the best version of this effect, of which there are 2 other versions so far. For 3 and a red, this is an instant that requires us to discard a card as an additional cost, but then we get to create 2 treasures and draw 2 cards. So we're discarding a card and casting this, but we're also drawing 2 cards. So we end up with the same number of cards in our hand, and with 2 treasures on the battlefield, and with 2 cards in our graveyard, whatever we discarded, and Big Score itself. So this is, in a way, it costs 3 more than Faithless Looting, but it's Faithless Looting that makes 2 treasures. So, and it's an instant speed. Pretty good. It's sort of a bump up from Seize the Spoils, if you want to think of Seize the Spoils as costing 1 less and making 1 fewer treasures. So yeah. Selez, Rune Knight. I don't know the Final Fantasy stuff, so if I am mispronouncing Selez's name, please let me know in the comments below. For 1 and Mardu, so 4 mana, we get a 4/4 Human Wizard Knight that says when it enters, we discard any number of cards and draw that many +1. So we might be just getting rid of our hand and drawing that many +1. Or we might discard 0 and just draw 1 card because that's 0 + 1. Or somewhere in between, obviously. Usually, in this deck, I'm going to discard my whole hand so I can get the most cards from it and the most cards into my graveyard. And Selez says, whenever 1 or more creatures you control enter, if 1 or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this is, even though it cares if that creature was cast, this is not a cast trigger. This is an enters trigger, which means the creature that comes back is also going to get that +1/+1 counter, as will Selez and all of your other creatures. So that's a nice bonus to bump up our things that are, for the most part, pretty beefy already, on top of the ability to put things in the graveyard when Selez enters. I like this card from the Final Fantasy Commander product. Next, from the Brothers' War, we have Hostile Negotiations. 3 and a black for an instant that says exile the top 3 cards of your library in a face-down pile, then exile the top 3 cards of your library in another face-down pile. Look at the cards in each pile, then turn a pile of your choice face up. An opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile in your hand and the other into your graveyard, you lose 3 life. So this is 4 mana, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. Put 3 cards in your graveyard. The only difference is you don't get to choose which of these piles of 3 is going to be going into your hand and which is going to go into your graveyard. And that's totally fine. Because in this deck, whatever you put in your graveyard is going to be useful. Whatever you don't put in your graveyard is also going to be useful because it's in your hand and you put it in the deck. It's going to do something for you. This is a card that is really powerful and I don't see it get played a lot. So I enjoy this little sort of fact or fiction variant. Next is a card from the Final Fantasy Commander decks again called Snort. I don't know at all what's going on in this art, but it's 3 and a red for sorcery that says each player may discard their hand and draw 5 cards. Then Snort deals 5 damage to each opponent who discarded their hand this way, and it has flashback for 5 and a red. So we're definitely going to discard our hand to this because we draw 5 off of it, and whatever we put in our graveyard we can use later, either as a creature to reanimate or as something that we can exile to reanimate something using our commander's ability. And Snort, it gives everyone the chance to kind of do a little wheel, like maybe they don't want to get rid of their cards, but maybe they're down below 5 cards and it's worth it just for the card advantage. But it's going to cost them 5 life if they want to. So I think this card is really funny and a fun time in this deck. Plus, for 2 more, we can flash it back. So we can even use this from our graveyard if it's gotten milled or if we've discarded it on its own. Next is Unexpected Windfall. Unexpected Windfall from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms is the Big Score. Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are identical cards, except that Unexpected Windfall costs 2 and 2 red, Big Score costs 3 and 1 red. But otherwise, same thing. Both excellent options here. We've seen Angel of Suffering and Doom Whisperer. This obviously lets us mill. Doom Whisperer lets us surveil. Sir Conrad lets us mill as well. We've seen Combustible Gear. We've actually seen all 4 of the rest of these. Combustible Gear Hulk may let us mill. Dreadhorde does let us mill. Rune Grinder and Angel of the Ruins can both be cycled, but Rune Grinder can also have us wheel. And finally, Sign of Darkness, of course, can cycle, which is another way to put it into our graveyard. So that's a lot of cards that can go into our graveyard and fill it up. So those are the big hits for our game plan. I want to talk about a few other cards that help out our deck that are in here to bolster our game plan. But before we do, let's go into the traditional support section of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction, starting with card advantage. Now I'm using the word draw here to just represent card advantage because it's a quick word to search for or use. It does not mean only draw spells. So we've seen a lot of these already. Faithless Looting lets us draw, even though we're discarding, so it's not actually card advantage, but it puts itself in the graveyard. We could flash it back. It's not quite the same thing, but it is nice to look at in this section. Collector's Vault is in a similar situation. We're looting with it. It's not really card advantage, but it's selection. And remember, in this deck, cards going into our graveyard aren't lost to us. Demand Answers is a similar situation. We're using it and discarding another card to draw 2, so just like these other ones. Mind Stone is in here, more as a ramp piece. It's a 2 mana artifact that taps for colorless, but we can also pay 1, tap it, and sack it to draw a card. Puts itself in the graveyard, gives us a card in return. We want both of those. Cemetery Tampering, we've seen already, it mills us, but if we get there eventually, it gives us a free card. Maybe we can use it. You never know. Commander Sphere is kind of similar to Mind Stone in its uses in this deck. It's 3 generic mana, and it's a manalith. It taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Not exactly a manalith in that way, but it gives us the colors we want. But we can also sacrifice it to draw a card, which means it's not a tap and sacrifice. It's just, we could tap this for mana and then sacrifice it while we float that mana to draw a card. Puts itself in the graveyard, we can use that later. Seize the Spoils and Big Score both require us to discard in order to draw, but we draw. Selez lets us discard and draw. Hostile Negotiations gives us 3 cards in our graveyard and 3 cards in our hand. We want that. Snort lets us wheel. Unexpected Windfall lets us discard to draw. Combustible Gear Hulk, we might draw from this. If our opponent doesn't want to take a bunch of damage, and by letting us mill, we just draw 3 cards. Rakdos, we might draw cards if our opponent doesn't sacrifice their permanents. Rune Grinder and Angel of the Ruins both can cycle, which draws us cards. The Balrog, we can cycle, which draws us a card. Archon of Cruelty, as we've seen, lets us draw a card whenever we attack, and when it enters. And Sign of Darkness, again, can cycle. So a lot of cards that are tagged with card advantage, but we've seen most of them already. Now let's look at our acceleration, which, again, I just call ramp. So Soul Ring, everyone knows Soul Ring. Costs 1, makes 2, that's all we need it to do. Wayfarer's Bauble is rampant growth, or lander tokens if you're new to the game, on a card. For a single generic mana, we get an artifact that we pay 2 and tap it and sack it, and we search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. This helps us shore up whatever colors we may happen to need if we're hurting for a specific color. And, puts a card in our graveyard and pulls one out of our library that we can use to cast things later. Arcane Signet, also something that should be in basically every commander deck, most every commander deck. For 2 generic, it's an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so it fixes us. Collector's Vault makes treasure. That ramps us a little bit. Felwar Stone is it's sort of in here as like a not quite as good, or maybe at best as good, kind of arcane signet, but it's a 2-mana rock. For 2 generic, it taps to make a color of any land an opponent controls. Of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. So if none of our opponents are running red, well, it doesn't make red, and that's too bad. But hopefully, we're not up against opponents that are nothing but blue-green, because then it just makes mana that we can only use, for generic mana costs, even though that's not terrible either. Milliken can make colorless mana for us. Mindstone also makes colorless mana. Chromatic Lantern is a manalith. For 3 mana, we get an artifact that adds 1 mana of any color, but it also says that our lands have tap to add 1 mana of any color. So this perfectly fixes our mana. All of our lands tap for whatever color we need. Chromatic Lantern's great in a 3 or more color deck. I've seen some people put it in other decks that are, 2 colors or less, just because they need a manalith, or just because they have the idea that they might be casting their opponent's spells. Maybe that's relevant. I like to put it in most of my 3 or more color decks. We've seen the Commander Sphere, taps for any color in our commander's color identity. Seize the Spoils makes treasure. Warring Triad can tap for 1 mana of any color. Big Score also makes treasure. Unexpected Windfall does too, and Balrog of Moria, when we cycle it, makes treasure. So we've got lots of ways to ramp here, several of which will stay in play. Some of them make us temporary acceleration in the form of treasure tokens. Let's go to our interaction section. Again, I'm just calling this removal. These are all different kinds of interaction. So Black Sun's Twilight is X and a black for an instant. Up to 1 target creature gets -X until end of turn, so we might be able to use this as removal. But in addition, if X is 5 or more, return a creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it incentivizes us to pay a little bit more mana than we maybe necessarily need to kill something, because our creatures are expensive, but we might be able to get them back. Even our commander, if we're willing to make X equals 6, we can kill something that's got toughness of 6 and get our commander back in the process. And then Black Sun's Twilight is in the graveyard and can be exiled by our commander's enters ability to escape something else. Next up, we have 2 great removal spells that I basically put in all my white decks. Path to Exile and Source to Plowshares are the same card with 1 difference. They both cost a single white, they both are an instant, and they both exile a target creature. But they both give a kickback to that creature's controller. Source to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power. Path to Exile lets them rampant growth. Find a basic, put it in the blade tapped, shuffle. Swords is better. Path to Exile is still very good. These are great. We've seen Bitter Triumph. It can kill something. Boros Charm can also kill something, because for a red and a white, we have an instant that says choose one. Either it deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. That's not really a player. Or it's not really a creature, so it's not removal in that way. But a player doesn't hurt. Planeswalker, that's nice. This might kill a planeswalker. Also, we can choose to have it give all of our permanents indestructible until end of turn. So whatever looked like a lot of trades in the attack we're making no longer is. But we can kind of get that same effect by giving target creature double strike until end of turn. So this might just kill someone with the kind of powers that we have on our creatures. Next is Emergency Eject, which I've started using over Stroke of Midnight, even though I love Eldraine. Emergency Eject from Edge of Eternities is 2 and a white for an instant that destroys target non-land permanent, and its controller creates a Lander token. Lander token I mentioned earlier on Wayfarer's Bauble. It's just a token that you pay 2, tap and sack it to rampant growth. So that forces them to spend their mana if they want to get the land out of it. It's not as good as Path to Exile, but it works out to be the same thing, that they have to pay for the land, and we can hit a non-land permanent with it. So we've seen Stinkweed Imp and how this has a triggered version of Death Touch. Not quite Death Touch, but Noxious Gearhulk can just kill something when it comes in. Rakdos forces people to sacrifice things. Angel of the Ruins can exile, disenchant artifacts and enchantments, 2 of them. Karavek, we can take this damage that Karavek is doing and hit any target with it. The Balrog, when it dies, if we exile it, we can exile a creature on each player's playmat. Archon of Cruelty, makes our opponents sacrifice creatures, and Ashen Rider lets us exile permanents. So that is our removal suite. Last, we have some Wraths. 2 Wraths this time. Starfall Invocation is the first one. For 3 and double white, we have a sorcery that says destroy all creatures, but it also has gift a card, which means as we cast the spell, we can promise an opponent that we'll let them draw a card. They don't have to agree. We just tell them, hey, you're going to get to draw a card. And then, when we destroy all creatures, if the gift was promised, they will also draw that card. Actually, they draw the card before the rest of the effects. But yeah, they draw the card first, we destroy all creatures, and because that gift was promised, we return a creature card put into our graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control. So it doesn't have to be our creature, but a lot of the times it's going to be, because so many of our creatures can bring other creatures of ours back. At the very least, we might want to bring back Kroxa and Kunoros, because if we lost a bunch of creatures in the process of this, then we could exile those cards to bring back the best one of them with Kroxa and Kunoros' Enters trigger. So yeah, Starfall Invocation, really fun. I know it could be like, I don't know, compared to a Time Wipe, I suppose, but I think it's just very strong, especially in this deck, and giving an opponent a card in the process, that's not bad. What is bad for them is Ruinous Ultimatum. I love this card. It's just so much fun. It was really great when Ikoria came out. For 2 red, 3 white, and 2 black, we have a sorcery that destroys all non-land permanents our opponents control. It is the biggest board wipe you can do that doesn't touch lands without hurting us at all. So we get up to this very restrictive cost, which is not terrific for our deck's mana balance, but we have plenty of fixing. And we reset everything else everyone has. Maybe we've got our Avatar of Slaughter ready and we can just go in and kill 2 people that turn. Yeah, Ruinous Ultimatum. If we're here to do big effects and we're in Mardu colors, we're here to play Ruinous Ultimatum. So let's look at the last few sections that help out our game plan, starting with Synergy. Synergy here has 8 cards, starting with Ephemerate. Ephemerate is a single white, and it flickers one of our creatures. Exile it, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and then it rebounds, which means when it resolves, we exile it, and at the beginning of the next upkeep, we can cast it for free from exile, at which point it will, of course, go to the graveyard. Why do we have Ephemerate in here? It's not just because we have creatures with good enters effects, it's because our commander has a good enter effect. We can play Kroxa and Kunoros, exile 5 cards from our graveyard, bring a creature back. Next turn, attack with Kroxa and Kunoros. Do the same thing again. Then when they block or try to destroy our commander, we Ephemerate it, it comes back, and we get to do that again, and we'll do it again the next turn as well. Ephemerate just has a lot of utility in this deck, whether we hit our commander with it or not. But if we've got enough creatures or enough cards in our graveyard, Ephemerate on our commander, like as a baseline, is a great baseline. We've seen Saw in Half and how it helps with our creatures with enter triggers, especially our commander. We've seen Celas and how Celas cares about our creatures entering from the graveyard or being cast from the graveyard. We've seen Angel of Suffering and how it just protects us and fills up our graveyard, which was what we want in the first place. Sir Conrad and Dreadhound similarly are synergistic because they just drain our opponents, just do damage to them or make them lose life based on our creatures coming out of the graveyard or going to it. Combustible Gearhulk, of course, it lets us mill, and it might do damage to our opponent when we do. Finally, Flair of the Hatebound has Undying, and it cares about our creatures coming back from the graveyard. So yeah, there we go. That is our synergy section. Next up, let's talk about some cards that just give us value. We've seen several of these already, but here are some new ones. Mardu Siegebreaker from the recent Tarkir Dragonstorm is 1, a red, a white, and a black for a 4/4 Death Toucher with haste. It's a human warrior. When this creature enters, exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this creature leaves the battlefield. So maybe we're getting our Avatar of Slaughter and exiling it under the Siegebreaker. We might do that because when the Siegebreaker attacks, and remember it has haste, for each opponent, create a tapped token that's a copy of the exiled card attacking that opponent. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice those tokens. So this is sort of Mobilize, it's sort of Myriad. Yeah, we get to attack our Siegebreaker to opponent A. We'll make a copy of Avatar of Slaughter, let's say, attacking opponent A, and then another one attacking opponent B, and another one attacking opponent C. And then at the end of turn, all of those tokens, or at the end of combat, end of turn, during our end step, we sacrifice all those tokens, so we don't have to worry about the Avatar of Slaughter on their turn. We can also do this with our commander. Maybe the Mardu Siegebreaker comes in, exiles Kroxa and Kunoros, and we choose not to put it in the command zone. Then we attack with the Siegebreaker. It's going to make 3 copies, or a number of copies equal to the number of opponents we have, that are legendary. So 2 of them are going to get legend ruled away. Maybe we have death triggers, but more importantly, we have enters triggers from all 3 of those. So 3 times we can exile 5 cards from our graveyard in order to bring something back. Mardu Siegebreaker, based on our board state and what we have already in play, can be used in so many different ways, and yeah, our opponents might block it, but it has death touch. So whatever they block it with, for the most part, they're having to trade in the process. And when they do, whatever was exiled under this re-enters the battlefield. So we've seen Etali, and how Etali can give us value by casting spells not just from the top of our library, but from our opponents. We've seen Scion of Darkness, and how it can pull cards out of our opponent's graveyard. And Avatar of Slaughter, of course, gives us an awful lot of value. Warstorm Surge is in this deck because we are in red and we have a lot of big creatures. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it says, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this turns all of our creatures into removal spells. This may turn some of our creatures into kill spells, just to take our opponent out if their life is low enough. Mardu Siegebreaker and Warstorm Surge, if we're bringing in 3 Avatars of Slaughter, then that's 24 damage. Warstorm Surge is getting to shoot. Avatar of Slaughter is shooting it because it's the creature doing the damage, but that's 24 damage being handed out on the table, which again may be enough to just kill an opponent. Yeah, Warstorm Surge, a lot of fun in this deck, like Big Daddy Impact Tremors. And then next is Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. Gisela is 4 a red and 2 white, so 7 mana for a 5/5 flying first striking angel that says if a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. It does not say if a source you control would deal damage. So this is making all of our opponents take double damage from everything else, from every source that isn't controlled by them. Actually, no, it's from every source, period. So if they decide to do 2 damage to themselves, they're going to take 4 damage while Gisela's out. This is really powerful in the same way that Avatar of Slaughter is powerful, but also, if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So we are protected, everyone else is dying. This is terrific for us and for our creatures, bad for everyone else. Totally worth 7 mana, totally worth reanimating. I love Gisela. So, we've seen our value section. Let's talk about protection. We've seen all of our protective cards already, but we'll talk about them. Boros Charm can give all of our permanents indestructible until end of turn, and of course Double Strike sometimes can act as protection. What might be a trade is now, First Strike can just turn that around. Angel of Suffering protects us because we don't take damage, we just mill, which is exactly what we want to do. Gisela protects us, as we just discussed, because we only take half damage from other sources. And Sarah's Emissary gives us actual protection from a certain card type. So yeah. That is our deck. Let's look at our lands before we close up, as we usually do. We are running 18 basics in Theros Beyond Death art, because of course this is Kroxa and Kunoros, that's where they're from. We're mostly black, but this balance seems to work pretty well for what we're looking for. We are running 3 bounce lands. Bounce lands I think are great in most commander decks because they require us to bounce a land when it comes in, and even though it comes in tapped, it means that because we bounced a land, we're going to have a land to play next turn, and so we can hit our land drop with it. In addition, Bounce lands are great in our deck because if our hand is full, like it often is at the first couple of turns of the game, bounce lands can make us end our turn with more than 7 cards in hand. Which means, even though we now have a land in play, we have too many cards in hand and we have to go to cleanup, which means we're getting to freely discard cards. So we put whatever in our hand we want most to reanimate directly into our graveyard just because we played a land. So that can really be fun for us to use. Next, we're running 10 fixing lands. We're going to start with our command tower. Of course, it's in here. It is an untapped land that adds mana of any color in our commander's color identity. For the same reason, we run Path of Ancestry. It is the same thing as command tower, except that it comes in tapped, and when we use its mana to cast creature spells that share a creature type with our commander, we scry one. So Kroxa and Kunoros is an Elder Giant dog. We have exactly one other creature of each of those types. So to be clear, Path of Ancestry, if we use it to cast our commander shares a type with itself, so it will give us the scry. But Dreadhound is a dog, Itali is an elder dinosaur, so it's an elder, and Sun Titan is a giant. So we've got 3 other cards beyond just our commander that if we end up casting with Path of Ancestry, we'll get that scry effect. We have this exotic orchard, which is Felwar Stone on a land. It's pretty good. We add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So yes, this may not be exactly a command tower for us, but even if it's an untapped dual land based on our opponents running black and white, let's say, or someone's got a red source and someone's got a white source, that's still pretty all right. Also, we have Temple of the False God, a land that I really enjoy. I know some people don't like this, but I think it's great, especially in a deck that has big creatures like this or big spells like this. It doesn't tap at all until we have 5 or more lands, which means 4 lands other than it. But when it does, it's a soul ring. So a soul land for expensive spells sounds pretty great to me. Then we have 6 soft fetches. If you want to run actual fetch lands in this deck, you certainly can, but I don't like to spend that much money on my decks. So we have Evolving Wilds. Comes in, we can tap it and sack it whenever we want to Rampant Growth. Search for a basic, put it in the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. We also have the 3 of the relevant New Capenna sack lands. So these, when they enter, you automatically sacrifice them, and when you do, you search for 1 land of up to 3 types that are named on it, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle, and then we gain a life. So they come with a free life gain, and I could have run the Maestro's card in this as well, but I wanted to have 1 card for each of the 3 2-color combinations. So Riveteer's Outlook can find us a swamp or a mountain, Obscura Storefront can find us a plains or a swamp, and Cabaretti Courtyard can find us a mountain or a plains. So if you wanted to run a sort of backup to Riveteer's Outlook, the Maestro's card lets us find the same 3 as this, except it has island instead of forest. So yeah, but I just wanted to do just these 3. We also have Myriad Landscape as our last, no, not as our last one. We've got Shattered Landscape, I should mention as well. Shattered Landscape can cycle for exactly Mardu mana, or it can just tap for colorless mana. But if we want, we can tap it and sacrifice it to treat it like an Evolving Wilds in this deck. We can find a mountains, plains, or swamp and put it on the battlefield tapped. So if we're desperate for mana, we can play it and just use the colorless mana. If we're not desperate, we can sacrifice it, find one of our basics, and if we get it late game, maybe we just cycle it and draw a card. And now, like all of the rest of these fetch lands, these are cards in our graveyard that we can get rid of as part of Kroxa and Kunoros' ability to reanimate something. But I will talk briefly about Myriad Landscape. It comes in tapped, it taps for colorless, but we can pay 2, tap and sack it to search for 2 basics that share a land type and put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it is actually ramp, because we take 1 land, and with a little bit of mana, we turn it into 2 lands. So it's slow, but we're not doing that much on the first few turns of our game usually anyway. So Myriad Landscape, great time to do it then. And like I mentioned, we've got 6 slow fetches, or 6 sort of soft fetches. This is the slow one. All of those put another land into our graveyard that we can use later to exile to our commander's escape trigger. Or, I mean, heck, we could also bring it back with Sun Titan if we feel like it. Next up, we have 3 pain lands. these are the 3 pain lands that are in our colors. They work for us, yeah. We've got a commander with lifelink, so we're not worried about the pain. And even if we were, it's... Come on. We have this giant dog and this hungry giant, elder giant doing things. We can take a little bit of damage in order to make sure we have untapped color fixing. And if we don't really need the color fixing, of course they'll tap for colorless mana as well. We're running No Bad Outpost, which is the one tri-land that is in our colors. Enters tapped, taps for any of our colors. So in a way, it's sort of like Path of Ancestry without the scry trigger. You could, of course, upgrade this to the Savai Triome, which is the same as this, but it also has cycling for 3 generic. Speaking of upgrades, you could upgrade your pain lands to shock lands if you really wanted to get typed duels, which might be useful to you. And of course you could do like some more fetches in here, like I mentioned, like Evolving Wilds or Shire Terrace would both be fine. Last we have these 3 utility lands. I like to run Demolition Field in most of my decks because even though most people generally don't like land destruction, having one piece of removal for problem lands like Maze of Ith or Glacial Chasm or even a Rogue's Passage is not terrible. Just one is fine, especially when, like Demolition Field, it gives a land back afterwards. So Demolition Field taps for a colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. They get to find a basic from their library and put it into the battlefield untapped, and so do we. So neither of us are down a land, or even down a mana from that land this turn. Next is Gyre Reach Sanitarium. I think this card really helps everyone, but it helps us more. Looting is great for us. It's a legendary land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it, and everyone draws a card and then discards a card. So it lets us put things in our graveyard, gives us the card selection we want. Yeah, we know why looting is good in this deck. Last is Rogue's Passage. Taps for colorless, comes in untapped. We can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable. That could be our commander. We could be getting in for commander damage as long as it's the 4th turn we've hit with our commander this game, or any one of our big creatures. I mean, just this nice utility on a land that doesn't cost that much to activate and does come in untapped and tap for mana. So there's Rogue's Passage. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making decks for each of the March of the Machine legends. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style you'd like me to build them with. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. And remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.